Good morning. I hope everyone had a good Easter break, and I hope everyone's enjoying this novel. As I said before, it's one of my favorite novels, and I hope everybody's having a good read as we go through this novel. Let's run through the preview for the next couple of weeks, basically, as we're getting ready to finish this thing out. Today, Group B is in class. Friday, Group A is in class. Next week, just keep Group B and Group A going. And then we'll have Writing Lab C. That's Melissa, Morgan, Brady, and Josh. And then we're going to have the quiz over Ordinary Grace. If you look at the syllabus, we should be starting the final novel. And we're just going to kind of go from there. Remember the book review. That will be due shortly after we finish the novel. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I screwed up and forgot to tell people about this, but today at noon in Marion Auditorium, there's another Great Plains Writers Conference or Writers Tour. The editor of the Yankton Press and Dakotan, Kelly Hertz, will be the speaker. If you can attend and you write a one-page summary response and get it in the formal papers folder, I'll give you some extra credit. I forgot to talk to Dr. Reese before break, and I will check with him today sometime about whether there's a video for those who can't attend. Speaking of the paper, I just want to remind everybody that it's a book review, not a book report. And I believe I have said all of this stuff before, but I think it's important to do a reminder. A book review is a form of literary criticism in which a book is analyzed based on content, style, and merit. Is it a good book? What about it makes it a good book? All right. As you go through, criticism is the art or practice of judging and commenting on the qualities and character of literary works. So you are judging whether it's good, bad, great, ugly, and you're going to talk about how and why. Remember that analysis is a form of writing in which the writer separates a subject into its elements or parts. And when applied to a literary work such as a poem, short story, essay, novel, you're going to evaluate the details of the text and tell me how and why it's a good book. You're going to break it down, that's the analysis. You're going to judge, that's the criticism. So as you're thinking about this, as you're finishing up the reading, remember the very, very basic thing of what it is you're going to be doing. As we start previewing the book itself for today's lecture, I think we're going to have coming of age, and we're going to talk about that some more. We're going to continue talking about the characterization of Ruth, Nathan, Gus, Ariel, Frank to some degree. We're going to talk about the connection, and we're going to talk about the use of weather as foreshadowing, and we're going to talk about whether that's done too much or not enough, or how it can kind of be something that is just kind of overused, and whether Kruger overuses it or does it well. They run into Morris Engdahl again. Morris is upset because of the events that happened at the quarry, and we have a situation where he decides to go after Frank, and we have the situation shut down fairly quickly by Warren Redstone. And we have this description of Morris Engdahl as his cowardice was greater than his stupidity. And I'm old. I have said this many, many times. I am old. And somehow Morris, all of a sudden to me, the way he is kind of formal and the way he is kind of name calling and all of the things that he does, seems to me sometimes to be a malicious version of Eddie Haskell. You who are far younger than I am probably don't know who Eddie Haskell is. And he was a character on the television show Leave It to Beaver. And Leave It to Beaver was one of the iconic shows of the 1960s. And he had shallow, sneaky character. If you look at the thing, he would have overdone good manners. He was up to no good, either conniving with his friends, picking on the younger kids. And it just strikes me that Eddie never went as far as to try to hit or beat or start a fight. He never really pointed, to the best of my knowledge, at Beaver and said, "You're dead." That said, Morris seems to me to have a lot of that same character. He seems to be overly, he's overly insincere as he puts down the Mr. and Mrs. He seems to be shallow. He seems to be sneaky. Um, and it just strikes me that he's, a malicious, malevolent Eddie Haskell. We could laugh at Eddie Haskell watching TV in the 1960s, but Morris seems to be somebody that you're not quite going to laugh at as much. If we take a look at Ariel, one of the things we talked about before is how Ariel was Ruth's hope for the future. That Ruth hoped that Ariel would do all of the things that Ruth was never allowed to do. Ruth talks about that on page 136 with Ariel will be able to do more with her talent than I ever did with mine. But Ruth and Ariel also get into this big, huge fight. Ariel starts standing up for herself. Ariel no longer wants to be Ruth version 2. Ariel wants to do other things. Ruth is coming back with her failures on top of her head and saying, "You have so much to learn." Ariel dropping the F bomb, which would have been rare, I think, in 1961, but nonetheless, she, drops the F bomb. She's showing herself to be somebody who wants to fly on her own. Now, we've already seen her sneaking in. We've already had her tell her brothers, "Don't get caught." But this is a much more overt form of rebellion than anything that she has done in the past. And so I think we are seeing her start coming into her own as a character at this point. And then on page 150, she has the performance. She is extremely happy. The smile could have been seen from the moon. He thought the sister must be the most special person on earth. And he knows she's destined for greatness. We haven't had huge complications yet in this novel. And one of the things that keeps somebody turning the pages is complications. Yes, Bobby Drake died, but we were only told about him. Yes, Gus has been in jail, but that seems to be a bailout. Yes, we have Warren Redstone, and we have Doyle trying to apparently frame Redstone. We have all sorts of things going on, but we don't have a major complication upon which everything turns. Obviously, we are going to have that and that complication, I think, is set up by the idea that she was destined for greatness. The fact that Ruth has put everything on her future, that Ruth wanted Ariel to be everything Ruth could not. And so at this moment, when it appeared like that was going to happen, that's obviously a time in the novel where there's going to be a twist. And I think what happens here is Kruger uses the weather to indicate that twist. I woke up to the threat of rain. Not just, rain. I woke up to, a rain shower. Threat. That seems to be a bit of foreshadowing that is hidden in one word and combined with the weather. Boil. The idea of a storm, the idea of things going deeper and deeper. And the gray had deepened, and the clouds began to boil. Threat, boiling clouds. deepening, darkening. All of those are foreshadowing bad crap is going to happen. And I've talked earlier about the next blow would be the hardest, and all of those sorts of things that Kruger does to foreshadow what's going to happen, to let readers know what's going to happen. But the question I think I have is he too heavy-handed in his use of foreshadowing? Does he do too much to let the reader know bad crap is going to happen? Go beyond what I've put in this presentation, but use some concrete details from the novel to support your answer. You can pause here, do the daily writing, and come back, but there's about 4 more slides that we need to go through. So as you're thinking about what you need to do here, you can come back to it. You can keep going and come back, or you can stop here, pause, and pick up the rest. But remember, there's 3 or 4 slides left. Make sure you get those because they're going to be part of what we pick up on for the, in class on Friday, in class on next Monday. It's the character, conflict, connection, theme, things that we've always talked about with books. Frank here is starting to come of age. And Frank has to start making some moral judgments. All right. And if you remember the confrontation on page 163, where he lets Warren Redstone escape, I think it's important to remember, though, that Ariel's gold necklace with a heart-shaped locket was found in the possession of Warren Redstone. And Frank has to make an adult choice here. When Frank calls and gets the cops, Redstone says, "You've just killed me." And so now Frank has to worry about, they don't know his sister is dead yet. They don't know that he has to make an adult choice. Will Redstone be killed? Will Redstone be threatened? And remember, Frank is a kid who said you don't get thrown in jail just for being a troublemaker. And now he is keeping somebody out of jail who is basically just a troublemaker. Obviously, growing up requires making adult choices. Here, Frank has to make one. Growing up also deals with confronting with the idea that everybody dies. He's the one who finds Ariel's body. He is the one who has to deal with the finding of the body. When you take a look at what happens, he protects Jake. He sends Jake to get his father. And he comes to this idea that perhaps knowing is far worse than not knowing. That's an adult sort of philosophical thing to come to. Now, whether I agree with it, whether that's correct or not, I don't know. But I do think it's an adult frame of thought that is moving him beyond being a kid into an adult. Do I want to know whether my sister's alive or dead? Which is worse, knowing or not knowing? He reaches a conclusion. And he reaches another conclusion. When they discover that the death is not accidental, he's got to deal with the idea that they've chosen to reject that possibility, and now they have to accept it. He has to keep understanding that things can get worse. The youthful optimism that he would have had before Ariel's death is gone. And so we are seeing in Frank this growth, this maturity. It is a work in progress, but we are continuing to see it. We are also continuing to see the effect of grief on the characters. With Ruth, she has gone from this strong woman to somebody who has silence and random movements. She is smoking and she forgets that she's got the cigarette in her hand. He has to put it out for her. We also see that at this moment, she is not willing to accept faith as a way to deal with this situation. And in fact, she seems to be moving further from Nathan. She had rejected Nathan prior to this because he wasn't making the money, he didn't have the prestige that she thought he would have when they got married, when she thought he was going to be a lawyer. She had her Ayn Rand phase, but now she is totally rejecting the book. I don't need that kind of help from that book. She won't even name it. And so we see kind of a crisis in faith that has come not just from Ariel missing, which was bad enough, but now from death. We see Nathan change this moment, this sudden realization. A lot of times when characters have an epiphany, it's a new form of wisdom, it's a change, and a lot of times it's a positive change. However, this epiphany becomes a man he didn't recognize, and it's a sudden change. We also see now that we're compounding the pain that he feels. And there are, I think, three things happening here. Number one, he's having a crisis of faith. He's referring to the things of the past as sins, and he believes he's being punished for those sins. Only he's not the only one being punished. And he's feeling as if he is the cause of the punishment for Ruth and for the boys. Second, it's a reference to the World War II, to all of the discussion of shell shock. It takes us back to Gus, when Gus was drunk, calling him a son of a bitch and saying that it was his fault that they were all dead. Apparently, there was something that happened. We never get the details. It really doesn't matter whether we get the details. At least I don't think it does. That might be something you want to write about in the review, though. Should we know more of the details that got him to the point where seeing his daughter dead makes him believe he's being punished for the sins of the past, the sins in the war, the sins that what Doyle would say caused him to crack, that caused him to totally change his goal from being a lawyer to being a pastor. Then, if we take a look at Gus, Gus too changes. He's a constant but quiet presence. He is living up to his responsibility for the boys. He is trying to cool them off. He is trying to get them to think about other things. And he is trying to take care of Nathan. Gus, who has been kind of this lost soul who follows Nathan from town to town, who lives in the church basement, who gets drunk too frequently, who gets tossed in jail when he's drunk, who gets into fights for no real reason. Gus, who has stood up for the innocent in kind of a, not crass is the wrong word, but he stood up for the innocent at church in a less than formal way, is doing his best to hold not just the family together, but Nathan in particular. And he's trying to make sure that Nathan's crisis of faith doesn't go over the edge the way Ruth's crisis of faith seems to have done. And you've got the idea of, I'm damned grateful at heart that you believe it. This crisis of faith is something that Gus is pushing hard to make sure Nathan gets over. Gus is growing into his own as a character. Gus is becoming more adult, if you will. It's not the same sort of thing as Frank, because Gus has been an adult all along, but now he is stepping up and fulfilling his role as a friend of the family and as Nathan's best friend. I believe this wraps everything up. I hope everyone has a good day. Those of you watching, we'll see you in class on Friday. and we'll just kind of go from there.